Brendon O'Connor is an Associate Professor in American Politics and Director of Teaching and Learning at the US Study Centre. Brendon O'Connor, thanks for joining us here at ABC 24 again. It has been noted today that the American public would have scarcely been aware that Julia Gillard addressed the Congress today, but does that matter so much?
Well, it's the political class that she's aiming to get to. So she was obviously performed fairly well. I thought it was a competent speech, but rather sentimental. And we see Boehner crying at the end there, something that's relatively typical for him. He's a rather sentimental man. And I think for Australian ears, it might come across as largely about the US rather than about Australia, which I suppose to some extent is surprising. Why does an Australian Prime Minister need to tell the US how great they are? But I think it would have gone across well in the chamber, certainly.
Yeah, well, was she just working her crowd, essentially? I mean, sentimentality does tend to go over well with Americans.
Well, it helps. I mean, I suppose one of the aims of such a visit is to say, don't forget us, we're a loyal ally. We're someone who has stood by you in the past a lot. So it's a remember us moment going to Washington for any Prime Minister of Australia. But whether Gillard got across new ideas about Australia or a big idea, say like APEC that Paul Keating promoted, I think you could question that.
OK, let me read you what an independent observer like the BBC had to say about Ms Gillard's address. It said, "To Australian ears, the flattery seemed heavy-handed, a bit desperate. Aussies might have called it crawling or sucking up. Not a desirable trait. But to Americans at this unpredictable moment in history, there are few things more welcome than an admiring ally, or as Ms Gillard termed it, a great mate." So at the end of the day, what was it, clever diplomacy or just sucking up?
I think, as I said before, I think it was well delivered, but it probably didn't show great vision. You could say that there's maybe a Keating-Rudd approach to such moments of trying to grasp them, get a big idea on the agenda, be it climate change as Rudd tried to promote, Keating's idea of an Asia sort of Pacific community, economic community. And this is more in the kind of John Howard mode to some extent, maybe the Howard Gillard mode of being a good friend, of being loyal, but not lecturing. I suppose those other Prime Ministers might have been seen as lecturing US presidents, which doesn't always go across well. The approach Julia Gillard has taken is a much softer approach, a much, in some way, as I've said before, a much more sentimental approach, rather than coming with a big idea and saying, OK, here's my moment in the sun, Australia's a serious country, take us seriously.
OK, this was an opportunity for the Prime Minister to encourage US lawmakers to maintain a focus on issues of importance to Australia. She did mention the relationship with China, of course, and climate change.
Yeah, I mean, the other big issue is trade, arguing for the United States not to become too protectionist. I mean, the gestures about China are pretty obvious ones, important ones probably to make to Americans in the sense of Australia as a good ally in the right part of the world. The climate change stuff was more about green technology. That's where the debate, I suppose, has moved in recent times. And it didn't really confront the Republicans who are controlling the House of Representatives with, well, you guys are a bit more sceptical about climate change than the Australian Labor Party might be. That was kind of fudged over by talking about green technology, about ways to go forward into the green economy.
So essentially you're saying the Prime Minister was a bit too warm and fuzzy, that perhaps what she should have done was to just introduce some elements to a speech that would have made the Americans shift a little more uncomfortably in their seats?
Well, that's probably a relatively high-risk strategy. I think if you take the visit as a whole, my argument's probably more relevant. Did she, when meeting Obama, get ideas on the agenda? Did she promote interests of Australia that are going to be ongoing? And that's going to take a bit of time to analyse that. What we've got are pictures of Boehner tearing up, the Sharon being passed around in the Oval Office. Those are great images, I think, for Gillard politically, but whether they serve Australia in the longer term as really strong sort of efforts on the foreign affairs front, I suppose I'm a bit more sceptical about that.
I guess you could argue that Julia Gillard's, it's been a tour de force for Julia Gillard, but should she have been offering more constructive criticism?
I think she's probably wanted to appear prime ministerial. She probably went into the last election as the leader of the Labor Party rather than the Prime Minister. This gives you a chance to be the Prime Minister of the whole country, and that's how she's used the moment. So I think politically it is quite savvy, and it might be quite useful to her at a difficult time for her. Whether she could have advanced a big idea, I suppose, is hard to know. Kevin Rudd might have come to Washington on a couple of occasions with big ideas, and you might say, well, how well did those things progress, particular issues like the Copenhagen climate summit. So you can come with a big idea, it might fail. You might say she didn't come with a big idea, but there was quite a lot of success to a degree.
You could argue that Julia Gillard went to a visit like this with low expectations after she'd told everybody that international relations wasn't her strong point. The Americans, were they seeing the real Julia? Is that the woman that's won them over?
Well, I think they were probably impressed with her behind the scenes. So I think Obama is obviously kind of warmed to her. It was quite an impressive amount of time that he spent with her. When Gordon Brown first visited the United States in 2009, he got, I think, a quick half an hour and a rather cold reception from Obama, who said at the time, meeting foreign leaders like this is a bit overdone. It takes me away from the important work. To spend the couple of hours that he did with her is interesting. It's a gesture maybe to a new Obama who realises having your head down with the policy stuff all the time doesn't go across well with the public or your foreign allies. But it also probably suggests that Gillard has won a place in the Obama White House, which was quite admirable and probably quite encouraging for Australia.
Okay, Brendon O'Connor, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us.
My pleasure.